The moment the palace finally snapped, it wasn't loud, it was cold, surgical, and devastating. It came wrapped in a single chilling declaration that ripped through royal corridors like a silent explosion, exposing secrets so calculated, so deeply buried that even the strongest bloodlines trembled under its weight. On February 20, Buckingham Palace issued a statement so precise, so loaded with fury disguised as dignity, that everyone understood its real target, even though no names were spoken. The Crown neither concedes nor collaborates in the commodification of its institution, its people, or their personal narratives. And at the center of this explosion stood Prince William, no longer the patient brother, no longer the silent observer. This time, he was done watching, done tolerating, done pretending this was just another family misunderstanding. Because behind the palace walls, something far more sinister had surfaced. Something that changed everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and betrayal. A single clause. Page 14. Section 7. A few lines buried in legal language that quietly handed over something priceless. Harry's voice, Harry's memories, Harry's entire identity to Meghan Markle. The revelation didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived like poison, slow, deliberate, undeniable. Lady Louise Windsor was the one who found it. Quiet, observant, underestimated Louise. She wasn't supposed to be the one to uncover it, but fate had other plans. During a private review of Sussex legal filings, she stumbled upon the amendment. An edition quietly signed in early 2021, weeks after Meghan and Harry's emotional public interviews, weeks after the world had watched Harry expose his wounds. And there it was, hidden in plain sight. A clause granting Meghan exclusive control over any retelling, adaptation, or commercialization of Harry's personal story. Childhood trauma, royal memories, even his grief over Princess Diana. It wasn't just legal. It was psychological capture. When Louise brought the document into the room, the temperature shifted instantly. Princess Anne's expression hardened first. She didn't panic. She calculated. She read every word with surgical precision, her silence louder than any scream, because she understood immediately what this meant. This wasn't protection. This wasn't partnership. This was ownership. Harry had signed away his story. And when Prince William learned the truth, something inside him snapped. This isn't a prenup. This is a publishing prison. Those words weren't spoken publicly, but inside palace walls, they echoed like thunder. William saw it clearly now. Every interview, every documentary, every confession Harry had made, none of it was entirely his anymore. Meghan held the keys, Meghan held the rights, Meghan held the power. Meanwhile, Meghan's moves began to make terrifying sense. Her sudden re-engagement with elite Hollywood crisis managers, her quiet trademark filings, her solo brand expansions, every step had been deliberate. Every move part of a larger design. She wasn't just building independence, she was building an exit with leverage. Princess Anne saw it first. She called it what nobody else dared say aloud: a monetization strategy disguised as marriage. Inside Clarence House, emergency meetings were held behind closed doors. No cameras, no leaks, just raw panic wrapped in royal discipline. Advisors presented timelines, legal assessments, and media projections. And every projection pointed to one horrifying possibility: Meghan could legally silence Harry forever. She could block his books. She could control his interviews. She could shape his legacy without his consent. It was narrative captivity. That clip became symbolic, because behind that door, William wasn't just entering a building, he was entering a battlefield. And the deeper investigators dug, the worse it became. The amendment wasn't signed randomly. It was signed during Harry's most vulnerable emotional phase, weeks after he publicly severed himself from royal life, weeks after he admitted feeling abandoned, isolated, emotionally raw. He trusted her. He believed she was protecting him. But what he didn't realize was that protection had terms, binding terms, terms that favored her. Princess Anne called another private briefing. This time, even King Charles was present. The air was heavy with betrayal no one wanted to name, because admitting the truth meant admitting something far worse, that the monarchy hadn't just lost a prince, it had lost control of its own narrative. That smile became infamous overnight, because insiders saw it differently now, not as charm, not as grace, but as calculation. Louise's digital analysis added fuel to the fire. Trademark filings, brand registrations, independent revenue streams built carefully, brick by brick, separate from Harry. It was financial insulation, strategic independence, and most chilling of all, it began years earlier. She had prepared for this moment long before anyone else realized it. Princess Anne delivered the most devastating assessment of all during a closed royal session. This is not a divorce waiting to happen. This is a pre-written narrative waiting to be released. And Prince William made his decision. He would not stand by and watch his brother's legacy be rewritten. He would not allow the crown to be reduced to commercial content. He would resist. That image said everything. The gates weren't just closing physically. They were closing emotionally, strategically, permanently. Meanwhile, Harry remained silent, and his silence terrified everyone, because silence meant realization. Silence meant regret. Silence meant he was finally understanding the truth, that the very story he had shared with the world was no longer his to control. And somewhere in Montecito, while cameras stayed away and statements remained unwritten, a prince sat alone with a contract he wished he had never signed. The silence around Harry didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly, like glass under invisible pressure, until the truth seeped through every corner of Montecito, every guarded hallway, every unanswered call blinking endlessly on his phone screen. Because by late February 2026, the realization wasn't theoretical anymore. It was personal. It was suffocating. Harry wasn't just watching his life spiral out of his control, he was watching someone else prepare to tell his story without him. And the most terrifying part wasn't that Meghan could speak, it was that he legally couldn't speak back. The contract wasn't speculation. It was real, binding, merciless. Page 14. Clause 7. Those 4 words became the quiet nightmare echoing inside palace walls, whispered in legal briefings, repeated in hushed royal corridors like a ghost nobody could escape. Harry had unknowingly surrendered something no royal ever had before. Not land, not money, not title, but authorship of his own existence. Every childhood memory, every emotional confession, every tear shed publicly after Diana's death, all of it now sat behind an invisible wall Meghan controlled. And suddenly, every move she made took on a darker meaning. Her silence wasn't retreat, it was positioning. Her absence wasn't weakness, it was leverage. Because while Harry retreated inward, Meghan's machinery moved outward. Meghan Markle stepping out of a private vehicle in Montecito, expression calm, composed, almost unreadable as photographers shouted her name. That calmness became its own message. She wasn't reacting. She was waiting. Waiting for timing. Waiting for maximum impact. And back in Britain, Prince William wasn't waiting anymore. He was acting, quietly, decisively. He began holding off record meetings with senior media figures, reinforcing one critical message: the monarchy would no longer tolerate narrative manipulation disguised as personal truth. It wasn't about silencing Meghan. It was about protecting the crown from becoming content. Because William understood something deeper, this wasn't just a marital fallout. This was an existential threat to the monarchy's authority over its own legacy. If Harry's story could be owned privately, then royal history itself could be commodified, reshaped, sold piece by piece to the highest bidder. And that possibility terrified them more than scandal ever could. Meanwhile, inside Clarence House, Princess Anne escalated her counter-strategy. She initiated legal containment discussions, plans designed to firewall royal identity from commercial exploitation. Advisors began drafting unprecedented measures to separate institutional heritage from individual narrative ownership. It was delicate, risky, but necessary. Because the crown couldn't rewrite Harry's contract, but it could protect itself from its consequences. Princess Anne exiting Windsor Castle, face emotionless, refusing to acknowledge reporters' shouted questions. That refusal to engage wasn't avoidance. It was discipline. Anne didn't deal in emotion. She dealt in outcomes. And her outcome was clear: preserve the monarchy, even if it meant watching Harry suffer privately. Because privately, Harry was unraveling. Friends noticed it first: the missed calls, the canceled meetings, the sudden withdrawal from projects he once championed. Insiders described him sitting alone for hours, rereading documents he couldn't undo, replaying decisions he couldn't reverse. One question reportedly haunted him endlessly: how did love become leverage? Because the contract hadn't just transferred legal rights, it had shifted power. Meghan didn't need to argue publicly. She didn't need to accuse or attack. She only needed to exist within the rights she already possessed, and the world, hungry for narrative, would follow wherever she chose to lead. Meanwhile, Sunshine Sachs quietly prepared the next phase. Solo interviews were tentatively scheduled. Publishing conversations reopened. Streaming executives circled cautiously, aware that Meghan's perspective alone could generate global headlines. The strategy wasn't chaotic. It was surgical. Position Meghan as independent. Position Harry as silent. Position the monarchy as distant. And let the public fill in the blanks. Palace guards standing at attention as the Union Jack waved violently in the wind outside Buckingham Palace. That flag had endured wars, abdications, betrayals. But this was different. This wasn't a threat from outside, it was a fracture from within. Because inside the palace, King Charles faced his own quiet torment. He couldn't intervene legally, he couldn't erase the contract, he could only watch his son confront a reality no father could shield him from. Reports describe Charles walking alone through palace gardens late at night, deep in thought, burdened by something heavier than public duty. He wasn't just managing a monarchy, he was watching his family dissolve under forces beyond his reach. And William, once the protective brother, now became something else entirely: the protector of the crown itself. His sympathy for Harry hadn't vanished, but it had transformed, because he understood that saving Harry emotionally could risk destroying the institution entirely, and the institution always came first. Meanwhile, Meghan remained publicly silent, and that silence was deafening, because silence wasn't absence, it was anticipation. Every day without her speaking increased the value of her eventual words. Every unanswered question amplified the mystery. Every rumor fed the narrative she no longer needed to control directly. The world was already writing it for her, and Harry knew it. He knew that whenever she chose to speak, her version would arrive polished, persuasive, emotionally compelling, and he would be legally bound to watch without correction. That was the true prison. Not isolation, not exile, but erasure. Harry walking alone across a private garden, head down, shoulders heavy, disappearing behind tall hedges. That image haunted royal watchers, because it captured something words couldn't: finality. He wasn't walking towards something, he was walking away from everything he once was. And back in Windsor, Princess Catherine quietly returned to the royal library one evening, her movements deliberate, her expression thoughtful. She placed a single book on the shelf beside volumes representing duty, restraint, survival. It wasn't a grand gesture, it wasn't public, but it symbolized something enduring. The monarchy wasn't built on voices, it was built on silence, on continuity, on the ability to outlast every storm, every betrayal, every narrative. And as February 20th, 2026 faded into history, the palace stood exactly as it always had: unmoved, unbroken, unyielding. Harry remained silent, Meghan remained waiting, and Prince William remained watching. Because in the end, this was never just about love. It was about legacy. And legacy, once surrendered, is almost impossible to reclaim.